Welcome, everybody. Can you hear me? Am I on? All right. First, before we get into introductions or anything, there's a couple of URLs at the bottom. We've got some resources that if you'd like to download them and follow along, it's only about a meg. You can either get it from Slack. If you go into Slack, go into the PSU Mac 208 channel, and I've got it pinned to the right. You can download it from Slack, or if you don't have Slack, you can also get it by going out to jamf.it/API resources. So give you about a minute if you want to try to get some of those. This was originally submitted as a workshop for a half day. We didn't get accepted, but we were asked to resubmit. That's why we've got 2 sessions here. So my name is William Smith. I'm a professional services engineer with Jamf. And my colleague here is Josh Roskos. Josh has, we actually started on the same day at Jamf about 2.5 years ago, but like almost anybody from Jamf, you're either a former customer or you're from a student from Eau Claire. So we are both former customers who have been using Jamf for quite a while.
Cool. All right. So we're going to start off with code editors. So these are kind of the big 3 that kind of separate code editors from the best and the worst. So one that almost everyone has now is syntax highlighting. So some kind of highlighting for whatever language you use. In this case, we're going to be doing a lot of bash shell scripting today. But just the ability to highlight your commands, your arguments, pipes, all that stuff. Auto-completion is the other one. Most of these do it now, but they don't all do it well. So trying to find which one does it the best, and the ability to run code live within your editor as well. Some other ones here, we got line numbers display, that's pretty common among them all. And then the multiple code language support, which I think most everyone does nowadays. Just depends if the one does all the languages you want. And a lot of them now you can customize your themes as well, downloading custom plugins for that. All right, so first one to talk about is Atom. This is one of my favorite ones. It's free, you can download it online. Very customizable. You can download any of the plugins you want to do website editing live, FTP uploads. You can customize all the displays. I haven't really ran into much I can't do with it. So, plus it updates GitHub live, so I like that. BB Edit is one of Bill's favorites. Been around for quite a while. Also had the free version of Text Wrangler. Now they've kind of morphed it all into one again. With a free version of BB Edit and then the paid version. But very simple editor, very clean. Does SFTP integration. Yeah. So does some of the autocomplete stuff, but you can change the colors. The themes aren't, I don't have preference to them, but you can do some theme customization with it. Code Runner came out roughly a year ago, I think. As this one started becoming bigger. But you can actually run code live in there. You can edit your scripts and then just do Command-R, click the run button, and it will run it live, show you the output below. It's nicer than going back and forth to terminal, because in terminal you can arrow up and then you have to try to arrow over to the spot you want to change. This, you have a nice little script there, you see it, just click where you want, edit, change it, Command-R, it runs it again. And it does really good error checking, so, and auto-completion. And here's where you're, Bill.
Alrighty. So those were code editors, and some of the stuff I'm going to be talking about are just some simple test and debug tools. The first one is Postman, and Postman is explicitly made to talk to APIs. It's kind of a GUI interface for something that really doesn't have a GUI interface. It's really robust. It can do a lot, but if you're not familiar with APIs, if you're not familiar with any kind of the REST API in particular, it can be overwhelming. And to be honest, I found that having worked directly with shell scripting and the API, it's useful, but I'm more comfortable in the command line now with the API than I am actually trying to figure out where do I go plug in things in Postman. But if you're not familiar with APIs or REST API in particular, it might be a good start for you to visually see what you're trying to do. The next one is Patterns. I don't use this too often, but Patterns is a regex tool. If you're like me, you might go out and try to do regex maybe 2 or 3 times a year. Everything else you probably have to Google. But this allows you to actually plug in a string, and then you can plug in your regex, and it'll actually highlight automatically as you go throughout that string, showing you what you're matching. It's a great tool just for being able to test something quickly and see that you've actually got the regex just right. And then finally, pathology is also one of my favorites. Pathology is a tool for testing XPath. Is anybody familiar with the XPath command? I see a couple of people. So we're going to be talking a lot about XML today. This morning in particular, we're not even going to be touching the API. Most of it's going to actually be just dealing with text and code and XML and how you manipulate it. That's what most of API work is just how do we do something with this XML. Pathology is one of those command line tools that I don't know why it has no man page. You can't type help after it and get any kind of information. It's on your machine without any kind of documentation built in. You have to go Google for almost anything that you want to do. But this tool, again, it gives you a visual indicator of what's happening. So what I want to show you is just what pathology can do. So I'm going to hide this, and let's blow this up just a little bit where we can see what we're doing. All you have to do is go open up an XML file. Now this is from your resources where I'm going, so I know you probably don't have pathology, but I'm going in here and getting just a simple XML file. Now don't worry about what is necessarily inside that XML file, but what pathology allows me to do visually is start here at the top. So the very beginning is advanced mobile device search. I'm just going to kind of copy that, and I paste it in. And anytime we're dealing with XML, we're going to be working in nodes. So if advanced mobile device search is the top node, the subnodes here would be name, they'd be criteria, display fields. I'm interested in getting what's under name. So I'm just going to add a slash, just like a file path, name. And then after that, criteria. And then after that, I'm interested in this name right here. And what I really want from that is the value that's inside name, which is asset tag. And to get that, you type in text with an opening and closing parenthesis, and that's it. If I click the run button, hold on. This is why we... Oh, sorry, what was that? Sorry, thank you. This is why pathology really helps. Try that. And have I misspelled it here? Criterion, name, text. Yep. Nope, I've got that out of order. There we go. So this helps me. It was a perfect example of why it shows you, for troubleshooting. It gives me the full path that I would need to use with XPath, and it validates on the right side, yes, I've actually got the stuff that I want. Now there's a debug feature in here which is also really cool. If I had not had you helping me out with that, I could have actually said debug and then just run it one at a time. And then it highlights going forward. So, okay, I like that. Let's go to the next step. Criteria, it shows me next step all the way until I get to my final result. So if you've ever had to deal with XPath, this is a nice interface for helping you figure out what is that path. All right, so pathology. All right, as I said, we're not going to, in this first session, really be dealing at all with the API. We're going to be dealing with XML. XML is a markup language, and it's actually very similar to HTML. It's actually, there we go. So every piece of information, as I said, it begins with what's called a node. In fact, everything in an XML file is made up of nodes. Every node has a beginning and an ending tag, and those tags describe the information that they're enclosing. So for example, if you look at name, the very second line, the node is name, and it's got a beginning and an ending tag. Name describes what's in between the tags, which is the name of the user. So XML looks similar to HTML, which is also a markup language. Both XML and HTML use tags to describe their content. They both have that beginning and ending tag, but if you forget something in some of that markup, they can seem like they're a little forgiving, but actually they're not as forgiving as what you would expect. So a code editor, some of the stuff that we were just showing you, with syntax highlighting won't even necessarily show you spot on where a problem is, and that's because HTML, XML, they're not code. They're just text documents with tags around them. But it doesn't mean that you can't use something like BBEdit or Atom to help you find something. So a good code editor is also going to help you with HTML or XML. All right, so I'm going to open up BBEdit. Again, one of my favorite tools to use. And let's see here. And I've got a file in here, problem.html. Now, I'm going to open that in BBEdit just to kind of look at it. Don't worry about what's actually in it. But this is an HTML file, and I also want to open this HTML file in Safari just so you can see what it's going to look like. So problem.html if you're following along. All right. That's what it looks like right now. But I can tell you it's wrong. I've got my bold font at the top, but the middle font is supposed to actually be regular plain text. It's not supposed to be bold. Something's wrong here. The bottom line, this is red, that's correct. So something that BBEdit can do is help you find out what that problem is. Now, if you look at this, how many of you are familiar with HTML? All right, good, most of you. Can you spot the problem right off? I mean, the syntax highlighting is working great, right? Exactly. So I'm just going to select, actually I don't even think I need to select it. I can just go up to markup, and in here is check, and I can say document syntax. And right here it's telling me line 7, I've got a problem with that bold, that closing bold tag. So yes, as a matter of fact, I have an opening tag B for bold. I need the closing tag /B for bold. Now, if I go up and I check, all right, no errors. And if I save that, I go back to Safari and I refresh. Get out of my way. Now my second line is correct. So again, don't let syntax highlighting fool you. It can make you think that everything is right and things still aren't right, just simply because we're not dealing with code. We're dealing mostly with text. All right. So going on, based on this example, the beginning and the ending tag says that everything is about a user. This is all about a user, and this is information inside this XML that is describing the user itself. The user has an account name, a real name, a UID, etc. We're not having to struggle to understand what everything means because the developer used human-friendly terms here. I've seen XML text markup that has been very unfriendly. But at least the Jamf Pro API makes all the XML that it submits to you something that you can understand. If you don't understand it, chances are that's something that you shouldn't be messing around with. But most of it is very, very readable. All right. So again, I'm going to go back to BBEdit here. And I'm going to open up a file called computer.xml. This is what an average computer record, just a single computer record from the Jamf Pro API looks like. It's a ton of stuff. It's thousands of little bits and pieces of information. That can kind of get overwhelming. One of the nice things that you can do with BBEdit, and I think Adam too, you'll see over here, if I blow this up, there are these little triangles. You can twiddle these closed, and it actually kind of helps you collapse a lot of stuff to make it a little bit easier to read. And if I collapse everything, then I can get a nice compact view of all of my stuff. Now, I'm not going to do all this because it's a ton of stuff at the bottom. But if you need to work in just a little subset of XML, and let's say it's halfway down these thousands of lines of code, you can collapse the tops, you can collapse the bottom, you can start just focusing in on what you need to do. All right. And then I think the last thing that I want to say about XML is that it's extensible. So what I mean by extensible is XML is designed to be a format that you can add something to. So for example, if I have user here as mmoose, then I can, and I've got the real name, UID, home. There might be another piece of information like, is this user an admin or a standard user? I can actually add stuff to this. So if I move that down, I can add in. This will not, this XML, that if I take it back to an older system that does not even understand what a user type is, what a standard user, an admin user, this XML should still work with that old system. But if the new system understands what it is, the XML still works. That's where the extensibility comes in. All right. So next we're going to be talking about command line tools. And the command line tools, again, are going to probably be about 90% of what you're going to be spending your time in. Getting stuff from the Jamf Pro API, putting stuff up there, that part's easy. Everything else is pretty much about reading XML, uploading, manipulating XML, and then uploading XML. All right. Now, some of this may seem a little bit basic, but I want to make sure that we kind of cover everything. You're probably very familiar with oxed, grep, things like that. But there are just a handful of things that you really even need to know about those. So even if you're not familiar with oxed, grep, I can show you a couple of commands, and that's all you really need to know about using it with XML and with the API. So simple one, echo. This is the first one that almost everybody learns. If you I'm going to be using Code Runner here for a lot of my examples here. If I just type in echo, I say hello world, hit, and I click the run button at the top, at the bottom, it does exactly that. This is why I actually like Code Runner. It's what Josh was saying. You can come in here, you can type, you can see a result without even having to leave the tool. But echo, very, very simple. We're going to be echoing a lot of stuff into log files. We're going to be using echo to redirect, things like that. Something else you can also do with echo. Let's say that instead of echoing regular text like this, I can actually do echo, and then, let's see. I can put a variable in here. And period at the end. So even though this looks like it's got a whole bunch of stuff, this could give you a very different result depending on what computer you're running. If I run that, This comes back with my Mac OS version. You didn't see that last number, by the way. But if I run that, everything is very simple, straightforward. Again, you're going to get a different result depending on what computer you're on. But the echo statement's great for stuff like that. All right, moving on to cat. The cat command, it reads one or more files and then it concatenates them. It puts them all together. This is useful when you need to be doing something like transferring a whole, a big file, like a 5 gig Mac OS package, but maybe you've got kind of a small pipe. You can't transfer the whole thing at once. You can actually split that into multiple segments, send each little piece across the line, and then on the other side you can say cat, put it all back together. Now, one of the things we actually use it for, though, is to read files. And there's a caveat that I want to kind of give you in just a little bit, but let's just see how cat works first. So going back to Code Runner, I'm going to go open up a file in our resources, and it's called just cat1.txt. All right, so that's what it looks like. That's all there is in that file. Now, if I want to run the command, I want to say bin.sh, bin.cat. I'm also, we can just type in cat if we like. I'm also trying to make sure that I put in the path to cat, and that's a security precaution that I'm taking. The last thing I want to do is run cat and without realizing that some piece of malware might have gotten on my computer and put its own version of cat somewhere and changed my path. If I specify the full path, I guarantee I'm getting the correct cat from the system and not some other place. But I can say bin cat, and then I've got these items on my desktop, so I can say tilde. This is the one thing I don't like about Code Runner. It does not have auto completion or tab completion. All right, all I'm going to do is just read that file. If I click run, bin.sh, it does not even like that. Okay. Well, terminal for the win. All right. So bin cat, cat1, and it just brings back the same thing that's in there. I can also up arrow, I can say bin cat2, and there's actually the second file. What I can use cat for is to say cat1.txt, cat2.txt. Oops. So cat1.txt, cat2.txt, and it puts the two lines together. Now at that point, I could actually take both of these, I can rerun that command, and I can use what's called a redirect. We'll talk about this a little bit more later. But a redirect says, take what I've just given you, and I want to put it into a file. So on my desktop, I can say, make a cat3.txt. And then if I open up this file that just got created on my desktop, you'll notice that it concatenated, it put both of those things together. Now I do have something in here which might give you an idea of that big file example that I was talking about. Let's cd into desktop so I don't have to keep changing stuff. In your resources folder, you're going to notice at the very bottom, there's probably about a little bit under a dozen files that are all together. And if I were to cat just any one of these files, just to read it, let's say xag. this is what's in that file. It's a bunch of crap. And that's because it's actually part of a bigger file. What I can use cat for is to actually make a new file out of all of these. I'm just going to say cat. I'm going to drag them all in at once. Come on. Go. We'll cheat. I'll just say get everything that starts off with the XA. And then what I'm going to do is redirect that. Again, I'll just put that back to my desktop. And I'm just going to call it cat.jpg. I took all those files, put them back together, and made a cat. That's the true purpose of cat. That's what it was really written for. But it can, again, read files, which is probably what we're going to be using it mostly for. Now, there is something I want to talk about cat, which is the useless use of cat. Anybody familiar with that term? Useless use of cat. I'm guilty of this. I am very guilty of this. I have written code, where I say, cat this file, I want to read it. And then I read that into a variable. And then later on, I say, echo this variable into, or cat this file, then echo this variable into grep, echo this variable into awk, echo this variable into something else. So with that, I've used echo, I've used cat, I've used grep. That's 3 different commands. And you don't really have to do that. The useless use of cat is referring to the fact that most of those commands, like awk, sed, grep, they can actually read files themselves. You don't have to cat and read a file first and then pipe it into something else. I'll show you what that looks like in a little while, but that's called the useless use of cat. Anytime you're trying to get familiar with coding, try to make your code as compact as you can. We're administrators. We don't care what it looks like, to be honest. If cat and then catting a file and then piping it into something works, do it. Because if you're familiar with that, our job is to get stuff done, not write pretty code. All right. So just to show you what I'm talking about here, if I go back into terminal, I am going to cat the app list file .text that's in your resources folder. And there's what it looks like. Just basically, I did a dump of my entire applications folder. And what I might end up doing, let's clear that out. What I might end up doing is say cat app list, and then I would put a pipe, and then I would say, let's grep for something, code runner. And out of that, it gives me the path that you see right there. So that was 2 commands, cat and grep. But grep can actually do this on its own. I can just say grep, and then I can say, I'm interested in code runner. Then I can put in the path to the file. That's 1 command. I hit return, I get the exact same thing back. So with that command, I am not doing the useless use of cat. Okay. I'm not going to worry about that one. More about useless use of cat. Same thing kind of goes with awk. So I just showed you a grep example, but awk has the same thing that I can do with a CSV file. In this case, come back here. And again, I realize I'm not putting in my my path, but pretend I'm putting in my full path here. one of the things I love about awk is that it's actually a text editor, a word processor. Unlike grep, which is trying to filter something out, awk you can actually think of as something that works with Excel spreadsheets when you have columns of data. And in this case, I've got in the resources folder a file that says cars.csv. If I just quick look at, you'll notice it's just like an Excel spreadsheet. It's got columns, it's got rows, and then it's got information here. Awk is great for being able to pull stuff out as columns. Now, in a CSV file, all those columns are actually separated by commas. What I just showed you is quick look, but if I actually open this up in, let's see, BB Edit, you'll notice that everything in here is really separated by commas, CSV, as simple as that. Awk is going to actually let me say I want to use a comma as my field separator. What thing divides the words going across? And if I end up doing that, then I can also say, what do I want out of this? And this is the part that you kind of have to learn. You build up muscle memory. I just happen to know what it is, again, just from practice. But it's not difficult. When I say print 2, what I'm saying is I want the second column. If I say print 1, I want the first column of that file, and so on. If I say print 5, it's going to come back with nothing. There was no fifth column there. All right, so I'm going to awk. I want to print the second column of my file, which is cars.csv. And what I get back, again, is just that second column. If I go back and I look at BB Edit, model, Accord, Phoenix, Chevette. And that's exactly what I see here. If I get creative here, let's just change it to 3. Oops. Then I end up getting the third column. So awk is going to be great whenever you're dealing with multiple pieces of information. You want to get something from a spreadsheet. All right. You're going to see how it all fits together later.
So we'll look at piping that to some kind of other product later?
If we need to pipe it, quite often what we're going to do, so the question was, am I looking at taking this particular command and piping it into something else for something? And it depends on what your use case is. The thing about XML, you're going to get a lot of data, and you're going to get a lot of data that's very similar, and it might actually come across, once you've cleaned it up, as a column of stuff. Or you might get 2 or 3 columns of stuff, and this is going to help you pare down. So things like grep, sed, awk, all of that is to help you take text that you might get back from the API, the XML, and just pare it down to what you need. And then at that point, you change what you need, you put it back in some XML, you're going to upload it. All right. Okay, moving on to the next one. Grep is another one of those that I was talking about. So far we've done cat, we've done awk. Grep is very, very similar to most of those. Its purpose is, instead of pulling out a column, it's going to pull out a word from the row. So if I were to, that's cat, run grep, and let's say that I'm looking for all of the Microsoft apps that are in my application folder. All right, so I can say grep Microsoft. That's my filter. That's what I'm actually trying to find. Anything that contains Microsoft. And then I'm just going to go back to my app list. It comes back with nothing but that. Remember that app list, I just showed it to you a bit ago. It's everything that's in my folder. Grep is just filtering out stuff. Now, what if I don't want Microsoft stuff? What if I want the opposite, everything but Microsoft? grep does have a command or an option you can add to it, -v, or you can actually say -inverse, I believe. They're the same thing. One's a shortcut, the other one's the full length of it. But if I say -inverse, oh, maybe it's not -inverse, it is invert match. So -v is actually probably easier to remember, but it means the same thing as invert the match. If I run all of that, you'll notice I've got all of my stuff in here, but I don't have Microsoft. So again, another way of whittling down, filtering stuff out. All right. And grep also has some really cool stuff for being able to, let's say that you know part of a file that you want to get, but you don't know necessarily where it is or how to get to it. You might know something else that's close to it. This is where we can use what's called before context and after context. What I'll show you here is the after context. All right. So in the resources folder, remember I was showing you just a little bit ago that we've got that big computer XML file, the one that's got all this stuff in it. What if I want the list of fonts that are in there? Let's go look at that file real quick. Oh, you would try to launch Xcode on me? All right. Tons of stuff. I can tell you that somewhere down in here, if I search, keep going. Let's do this. I know it's a tag, so I want to add the opening and closing brackets, the gators. Here's all of my fonts. Let's say I want to get a list of all the fonts that are on this computer. This is where grep can really help us out. Notice if I blow this up here, if I want this, all right, I've got name all over the place. I've got my computer name, I've got my username. I can't really grep on name. That's not going to help me. I can, however, grep on font. And I can say, well, show me all the stuff that's close to font, and that'll be good enough. That's where the before context, the after context comes in handy. So if I say grep -a for after context, let's blow this up where we can actually look at it again. If I can find font, then I can say that the next line contains what I want. Does that make sense? So every match of font, show me the next line. So I can say grep after context 1. Show me that line that show me font, show me the next line. And then I put in my file. Oh, actually I should say, and I also want to search for font. So filter that out, show me everything that's got font, show me the second line as well, do it to this file. And you'll see it gives me back everything. It's extra content, but at least I've whittled down to the fonts. And later on, we'll work at kind of cleaning that up too. And I'm not going to really, well, I guess I could show you the example on this, but you can go reverse. In this case, I want to find all printers that are LPD printers. And if I go into my BBEdit file, I just do a search for LPD. Wrap around. Where are you? Right here. I've got that printer. How do I find all of my LPD printers? I know that it's going to be somewhere in a URI. So I'm going to be searching all of my URIs for LPD. And then I want the line above it. What's the name of that printer? That's basically the same thing as the after context. We'll do the before. So instead of A, and I always get these backwards, by the way. I never could remember if A stood for after and B stood for before, or if B stood for below and A stood for above. You'll get them backwards. But if you use the long option names, you'll probably be okay. I want to search for just LPD and look for my file. Let's see if that's what I'm after. And it does. It brings back just one match, and it also gives me my printer name. At that point, then I could probably do a grep, and I could filter out just by name, and I could get just that one line. All right. And then let's talk about awk. Oh, we already did talk about awk. Awk is all... there's more stuff to awk that I wanted to show you. Awk is also one of those cool things. I just did a little demonstration with the comma a little while ago as your separator in a CSV file. But that separator could be anything. Let's go into the resources folder. Let's go find that cars CSV. I'm going to duplicate it just to make a copy, and I want to open that up in BBEdit. And I'm going to do something horrible here. I'm going to do a find replace. I'm going to replace all the commas here with Bill and Josh. Ah. It makes no difference what your separator is, as long as it's a consistent separator. All right, and here's where it gets interesting. If I awk -F for my field separator, what is it that's dividing my columns? I can put in here Bill and Josh. Spaces and everything. I can say I want to print the second column of all that stuff. And then I can put in my file name. And probably save that. So cars copy. .csv. It still comes back with the column. Your field separators make no difference. Don't let them blind you into thinking that you can't get that information. As long as it's consistent, you can. I've been doing all your stuff, I just realized. Sorry. All right, so I'm not going to worry about that. I'm not going to worry about the field separators. We've already done the awk. And now here's something else that awk can do. Again, we're going to be dealing with XML. A lot of the XML is going to have those beginning and closing tags like app. So if I look at that file again of my computers, or I'm sorry, of my, I've got a computers.xml file in here. Let's open that up. Oh, sorry, appslist.xml. This is an XML version of everything that's in my apps folder. And just to show you that it starts off with applications to say everything in between this is an application, but every single app path has an app at the beginning. It's got a /app at the end. How do I get rid of that stuff? Awk. The nice thing about awk is it can use as a field separator just one thing or multiple things. And in this case, I can say my field separator is going to be the app tag opening and then the closing app tag. show me everything that's in between it. So field separator. This is my first separator, which is app. I use a pipe or a vertical bar to actually separate all the different things that I want. So it could be a comma, it could be a period, it could be any series of numbers or letters. Doesn't matter how many. All of them end up becoming field separators. Print the second item. Computer XML. Oh, actually. Yep. I keep going back and going back to computer. Thank you. applist.xml. So I'm using app as my my field separators. I'm getting the second piece of information, which should be between the two. That's how you can start stripping stuff off and whittling down to your information.
So why again is that the second one? The question was, why is it print 2? It seems...
Print column 2. So if you think about it, let's go back and look at the text here. And it is a little bit of a mind purge here because you have to train your brain like the computer is. But let's say if I were using application actually as my field separator, is there something before application? Technically there is. It's the beginning of the line. Although you don't really see it, we don't consider it a character. But yes, there is something at the beginning before application. And if you think in terms of regex, are you familiar with regex at all?
Yeah.
Okay. The beginning of the line comes before application, so application becomes my field separator, which means the thing after it is my second item. So that's why I'm pulling 2. And the same thing happens here for the apps. There is actually stuff in front of the app tag. That's column 1.
Oh.
All of that stuff is column 1.
So if all the apps started at the beginning of the line, would it still be the same?
Yes.
Just-
Pretty sure.
Okay.
I say that. I'm pretty sure.
I was just curious because it seems like when you're using comma as a field separator, you don't really include the commas in the columns. But now that we're having multiple values, those get included.
Yeah.
And
Like I said, I'm saying that. I don't think I've honestly ever tested that.
And so those multiple field separators too are actually or. So it's not and, it's or.
Yeah,
either
that's
one.
definitely worth pointing out. Okay. All right. I'm just going to let you take over here. I've been doing all of Josh's stuff here.
Oh, no, that's where we're at here. All right. So vertical bar. All right. So quite common in any kind of bash script. We're going to usually go from either catting, the useless use of cat, or echoing something into another application, whether it be grep and awk, as we've done earlier, XPath. It's just a way for us to kind of transfer that output into another application and do something additional with it. It's kind of a way we can whittle down the XML. So in this one here, see if Code Runner will work for me. All right. So and let's see, do SR. All right, so we're gonna start out with grep at first here, and just try to get all our fonts listed, and it's not gonna work. And now I'm wrecking the slides. All right. Let's try just relaunching this here. You gotta get your trial unlocked, Bill.
The license is actually per user. It's in my other folder.
Let's just tab here. Okay. Let's try this again here. All right. So, user. Computer. Okay, so like earlier, we have all our fonts now in that computer's XML. So let's go ahead and add a pipe to it, and we're going to awk for just the names of all these. Go back up here, pipe it over, do the full path. Look for name. And that the pipe characters also is the OR operator in this case. So we're going to look for everything for those two. And we're going to print out the second column again here. All right. And so now just by doing that, we can kind of whittle down more of that information and get just the names there. Now we also have a lot of blank spaces. So let's see here. If we go ahead and, oops, maybe, there we go. If we add in between the name here and the print statement, do F.
And DNF is a variable. It
Yep.
stands for number of fields. So if we were looking at that cars CSV file again, it would be 4 fields across.
And that'll give us just our fonts.
So in this case, he was saying, NF, show me all the fields that have greater than one result.
All right. Go back here. All right. So that is the pipe character. All right. Said. Quite a fun one. There's a lot you can do with it, but at its core, it's there for substitution. So that's what we mainly are going to use it for. An example here, we're taking a MacBook Pro and we're substituting the space with a hyphen. Sorry. So it can, yeah. So you're basically just substituting characters out. So we'll flip over here and we'll just do a couple of things with that. All right. Let's get rid of that and let's see. So we'll just do that echo stand here. So MacBook Pro. We're going to pipe it over to sed. We're going to substitute. And after this force / we're going to say what we want to substitute. In this case, it's a space character. Just going to put a space, another /. And then what do we want to replace that space with? So do a dash, another / here. Now, this is one line, so it's not going to really matter. But usually you'll put the G on the end here. That's a globally. So we can set this anywhere there's a space, it's going to replace it with a dash. If you leave the G off, it's going to do the first occurrence. We'll go ahead and run that. Replaces MacBook Pro with a MacBook Dash Pro. All right, so let's go ahead and get a file here. Okay. Let's do this. See if I get the spelling right here. All right. So you have a file here called alphabet.txt in that resource package. Quick brown fox jumped over the lazy dogs. So let's go ahead and start replacing some of the words in here. We're going to go ahead and pipe this over to sed, and we're going to do a substitution on it. And first, let's replace quick with slow. Now we have the slow brown fox jumped over the lazy dogs. And we can keep going and going with this. And we don't have to keep going like piping over to another sed statement, and we can do another one that way. Or with sed, we can just add different executions. So -E, execute that one. Another one here, we'll do sed. We'll do fox, change out the cow. And let's do another one here too. Jumped to tripped. All right. So we can start replacing more and more with sed. You want to pick up where you were supposed to?
I can if you want.
No, that's okay. So here strings. I don't use these a whole lot. That's why he was going to slide. But basically, it allows you to kind of another way to pipe more information back into a character. It's just weird reading it because it's kind of in reverse order. So same here. We're going to do sed. We're going to change world to Wally. But we're going to say instead of doing echo and piping over to it, we're going to inject that statement afterwards. So if we go ahead and do, so we'll substitute world for Wally, and we're going to use the here statement to inject hello world. Now we have hello Wally. It's just another way of doing things. As I'm sure most of you probably know, when you do scripting, there's 1,000 ways to do one thing. So we can also use letter commands, not just sed. We can do this with awk, grep. They all can do this. So. And redirection, Bill talked about this a little bit earlier with the cat file image. So this allows us to basically take the contents of our output from our command and redirect it to a file of some sort. Could be a text file, could be an image, doesn't really matter. So there are some different options here. So we have just a single greater than sign. That's basically going to be, we're overwriting a file. We're not appending to the file, we're just going to put this to a new file. If it's there already, it's going to overwrite it. It's gone. If we do the double gators, then we're actually going to add the end of the file. So it's just one mistake you don't want to make when you're writing a script. We can go ahead here and we'll do a couple little echo statements with that. So we're on echo. So here we have our, award-winning novel here. It was a dark and stormy night. And I'll put that to a text file. If I run over here to the desktop, in our resources file, actually, should have our novel.txt. And there's our award-winning novel. It was a dark and stormy night. All right. So, and then I won't redo the cat. So you can join multiple files, output another one. Now let's say that novel, we wanted to add something to it. So we can do, and it was cold outside. And we can do a double there and put it back in novel. Run it. Bounce over to Finder here. And we'll have both those in there now. So just a way to keep adding to a file. Great use case is logging especially. If you have your own log file you want to keep as part of a workflow or just on your machines in general for all your stuff, it's kind of a way to keep adding to that.
Will that create the file if it's not there?
Yes.
So the question he asked was, will it create the file? If it's not there, answer's definitely.
Yep. As long as it has permissions to that directory. The other little caveat there, but yeah. So. All right. Variables. This is where things get fun. We can start storing things. I try very hard in all my scripts to never store anything to a disk until we have that final product, if it's something we're trying to accomplish and actually store to a disk. But I try to keep everything in memory. I don't want to write anything. So we use variables and arrays quite often. I'm going to talk about variables here. It can be quite simple. Basically, we're going to store some kind of text or information, and we're just going to give it basically an alias or a reference name for it. So we can go ahead and create a variable called name. My name is Josh. And we can do an echo statement that says, hello, name. So that's going to basically go ahead and just replace the variable in the statement. So like we had our hello Wally earlier, we can do the same thing. We can even embed this in more stuff here, so we'll change this to Wally. And it said first. So you can kind of build, oh, should probably actually include the variable in there.
Replace your sync. Yeah, there you go.
All the way around.
That's what I do.
There we go. So you can use variables in a lot of different places. We'll use this later on, this afternoon, or later this morning when we do the actual API calls. We'll use it to actually store our username, password, Jamf URL, all that stuff, just to kind of shorten up the script. So. Yeah.
Oh, got the bugs.
Yep.
So just to clarify, that replaces the value that's in the variable and not necessarily the use of the variable in that statement?
Not sure I follow.
Okay, so you put in the value for the variable.
Yep.
And then are you, with the use of sed, are you just replacing, you're replacing the text with the variable?
Correct,
But you're not doing anything with the parameters that are assigned, or with the values that are assigned to the variable with that command?
No.
Okay.
So if I was to put in the name variable in there for world and keep Wally there, it would just replace Wally with world then. So yeah, the only way to actually change the variable would actually be to basically rewrite it out. So if we wanted to go in here, and now we can change it to, here's Bill now, and we'll have that out. So you have to actually kind of identify what it's going to be. All right. Yep. All right. All right. XML lint, so more XML stuff, fun stuff. All right, so first, a lot of time when we get our XML from Jamf, or really any kind of API, it's going to be what we're kind of calling flat. Can't find a good name for it, but it's flat. It's all one long string. It's really kind of a pain to read. So to make it prettier, we're going to use XML lint to format that and actually make it so it's legible. This also helps us around the line when we start doing greps and awks, because them are by line. So we can actually use that then to really get the information we need. So in this example, we just took a flat XML file here, which we'll pull up here. So it's really just one long line in this file. So we'll head over to Code Runner here. And go ahead and run XML lint on this. And we're in the file, so. Oh, thank you.
XML.
XML. All right, and so there we go. Now it looks pretty. All right. I don't want to skip too far ahead, but yeah. So from here, if we wanna, I'll just do it since we're here. We can pipe over to that, and we can say, okay, we want to look for the real name. So it just gives us that one line. If we were to do that without the XML lint format in there, it's going to return the whole line because it's on that line. So. Actually, let's go here. Okay. Alrighty. So the other way to kind of do the reverse, so a lot of times we can keep it pretty in the script to upload to the API, which we'll do today later on just to make it easier to read and understand what's going on. But that's going to take up a lot of space in your script. So a lot of times we'll reconvert this back to a flat or no blanks formatted XML just so that we can easily work with it within a script. So here, we'll bounce back over to Finder. We have our formatted XML, so it's basically already pretty. If we go over to Code Runner, no blanks. Yep, no blank. And it puts it on one line there. It actually is one line, it's just kind of wrapped due to the length of all of that. It won't show it on there, but yeah, it is one line. So
What's the advantage of putting it back? What's the advantage of putting it back to one line? That's the first thing I do when I make a profile is I put it into the pretty format so that I can edit it later. Is there any advantage of having it back to the one line?
the most common use case is when you're actually going to re-upload something to Jamf. So once you have it, it's fine. But in your script, usually you don't want to have to actually make an XML template line by line by line. It's just going to take up that much more lines of code. You totally can. It works. We'll do it today. Just to keep it simple, you can have it all in one line, just so it doesn't add additional overhead to your script.
Gotcha.
All right, XPath. This one's a lot of fun. So grep, sedawk, they do everything we need, but it can be simpler and easier. So we'll use XPath here to actually get the specific things we want without having to chain a bunch of information together with sed and awk. So here, let's go over to Code Runner and going to do XPath on our computer XML file.
And I can tell you right now, already XPath doesn't follow the norm of having you put the file name at the end. It wants it right after the name.
All right. So with this statement right here, I'm skipping all the sed and awks, making it pretty, don't care. I'm going to get right down to it. I'm going to go to the computer node, within that to general, site, and then name, and get that name of the site that it's in. Now here, we do see that we have 3 lines of output. Those 3 lines will not be stored in a variable if we were to store this in a variable. It's actually only getting the Minneapolis line there. The rest of it's just additional output it's showing. And if you want to know specifics, the top 2 lines are actually output in std error. The bottom line is std out. So you can kind of break that up if you want to. But if we're to actually go in here and site, we run this, echo. It's just Minneapolis that's in that variable. So it just stores that piece of information. With XPath, you can also do the here statements or indirect or redirect information in there. So here is the perfect example of a useless use of cat, but it gets the point across. Many times when we're doing API scripts, we're going to already have that XML stored in a variable from our curl command, and now we can manipulate it with XPath there, which would be this variable. So let's just go here. And all right. So same thing, just using cat for that. Yep.
This may seem kind of obvious, but it looks like you have to know the exact path to get down to your key.
Yes.
Okay, because like normally when I'll use grep quite often when I'm trying to find the version of a plist. I'll just grep the plist and I'll do grep A1 version. It'll give me the version of it. But I don't necessarily know what exact hierarchy it is to get to that key. And so it's a real useful tool, but I have to know exactly where I'm digging.
Yeah, so there's two ways to do it. You can either dump the XML, and you can just kind of look at it and actually see in here. So we can actually see we have computer, we have general, then we have our names here, our remote management. So we can kind of look at it and see what are the sub nodes in there. Also in the API docs on your Jamf Pro server, it'll have that listed out as well in the examples. But you do have to go look for it. But it does save you some time, at least scripting wise. Yeah. That's one command. The other thing you can do when you can use pathology as well for this, but one of the things you can do if you're just kind of trying to figure out where things are, I believe it's our next slide. Yeah, so we can also use XPath to just return a subset of results in the XML. We don't have to say the exact key we want. We can just return a subset of results. So we'll go back to our computer one here, but instead of actually looking for the site name, let's just say I want to know what's in the remote management section of that XML file. I can get just that section. If I wanted to start out at general, I can do that as well. So you can kind of work down through it that way as well. All right. I will mention just one more thing about XPath, and we don't have it in here just because it's more advanced and takes a lot more loops. But with this, you can also even go in as far as identifying which element of an object you want to retrieve. So like fonts, there are thousands of fonts on a lot of our machines. We can actually go in here and actually specify the path to that endpoint, that node, and say, okay, I want the first occurrence or the second occurrence. We can loop through and grab each one individually if you have that use case. So you can specify that as well. Yeah. So XPath's very powerful, but unfortunately, like Bill mentioned, it's not anywhere documented on the Mac. So have to go out to the interwebs and get those. All right. Want to wrap us up, Bill?
Alrighty, so as I said at the very beginning, everything that we're covering in this first session is the basics of how to manipulate XML. And pretty much all the stuff that you saw here, that's what we're going to be using in the second session when we actually start working with the API. Again, this is 90% of the stuff. The API is probably only about 10% of the work that you'll actually do. And even though you might know awkset and grep back and forward, any of these commands, you're really only going to use a very small subset of features of each of them. We've shown you almost all of them. So we've got the second session right after this one. That's when we'll actually be touching the API itself. All right. And with that, you've got 2 seconds.
Quick question. Oh, sorry. Cool.